It is official. As of a week ago, the Utah Jazz have officially started the rebuild. They traded Donovan Mitchell to the Cleveland Cavaliers and now they suck, is what an idiot would say. Sure, they won't be a playoff team next year, but it's not like they were going to make it out of the first round with Mitchell and Gobert anyways. They realized things weren't working to the extent they wanted them to, so they started the rebuild early. These two moves were genius moves. There's a ton other teams have to learn from this Utah's offseason, and Danny Ainge might just be one of the greatest GMs ever. But before we get into that, let's look at the trades that the Jazz made. First, they traded Rudy Gobert for 5 players, including Patrick Beverley, rookie Walker Kessler, and 2 young and upcoming players in Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley. If that wasn't enough, they got 4 first-round picks. Also, these weren't pick swaps most of us are accustomed to. 3 firsts were unprotected and the other was top 5 protected. Sure, the 2023 pick will probably be in the mid-20s of the first round, but who knows what the picks will be like in 2027 and 2029. Then, in a small deal, they trade Patrick Beverley for Taylor Horton-Tucker. Lastly, the blockbuster trade of the summer. They trade Donovan Mitchell for Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, and a lottery pick rookie Ochai Agbaji. I'll learn how to pronounce his name once he gets minutes. As well as 3 unprotected firsts and 2 swaps. Again, 3 unprotected firsts is huge, as we never know how good the Cavs will be in 2029. So that sums up the trades. Now, what this leaves Utah looking like next year. First, their starting 5 looks semi-respectable, with Mike Conley, Colin Sexton, Bojan Bogdanovic, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler. Off the bench, they still have Jordan Clarkson, Malik Beasley, Udoka Azubuike, Jared Vanderbilt, THT, Rudy Gay, and Ochai. Now, I'm not going to act like this team is very good, but I also don't think they're going to be a team that only wins like 20 games. They have a good mix of established talent and young players who will have a chance to improve greatly now that they have good opportunities. I expect lots of improvement out of players like THT, Jared Vanderbilt, and Colin Sexton. I mean, we saw OKC trade for Shea, who was solid in LA, but with the increased opportunity, he is now one of the most promising young stars. And maybe they go even a little further and trade some players like Malik Beasley, Mike Conley, or Bogdanovic for more firsts and young players. Sure, that would probably make them like a 15 to 20 win team next year, but as the great Sam Presti once said, probably, you can never have enough firsts. Also, that would give even more opportunity to the young guys and future rookies coming in. So, the future looks bright in Utah, but up to this point I haven't mentioned anything that makes these trades genius like I said at the beginning of the video. The player and pick returns were good, but the genius of these moves aren't about the return they got. It's about Utah jumping into the rebuild before it was totally necessary. Now, this might seem like a bad thing, but there's one thing us as NBA fans have to realize. Like Oakland A's GM Billy Beane once said, if we don't win the last game of the season, it doesn't matter. And I think this is a great approach. At the end of the day, the goal is to win a championship, and the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert duo was not going to do that. They were really good at being a team that might make it to the second round, but making it to the second round is not what people will make note of. Another reason it is great that they started the rebuild earlier is that their stars still had peak value. We've seen what happens to teams when they start a rebuild after their stars ask out or they start to decline. And it is difficult to find a good deal because they seem desperate. I mean, we saw the Nets struggle to get a good package for Kevin Durant because he asked out. By trading their stars before they publicly asked out, they still have peak value and got great returns. Now, like the title of this video says, other teams should be looking at this Jazz rebuild as a model for their own rebuilds. I mean, with Danny Ainge at the helm, things often go well, but I'll get more into that in a bit. There are a lot of teams that are afraid of starting a rebuild because they don't want to give up their playoff or play-in spot. We see teams like the Trailblazers make very small moves every offseason that haven't amounted to hardly anything. Even until recently, the Spurs and Pacers weren't willing to let go of their play-in spot. Meanwhile, teams like the Suns, Grizzlies, Timberwolves, Bulls, and Sixers are some of the top teams in the league after struggling for years. Sure, they were the butts of lots of jokes over the years, but once any of them win a chip, nobody will remember that. Teams have to be willing to go all in to win if they really want to. And next week, I'll be going over the truth of what happens to players who stick with hesitant teams. Now, the part you've all been waiting for. What this means for Danny Ainge. He did it again. Again, you might ask? What team was Danny Ainge the GM for, where he started to rebuild early and ended up going well for the franchise? Oh right, the Boston Celtics. The team that was just in the NBA Finals. In case for some reason you don't remember the trade of the decade, in 2013, the Celtics sent aging stars Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett for some mediocre players, but also got 3 unprotected firsts and a pick swap. At the time, this trade seemed fair, a slight edge to the Nets, but looking back, that was not the case. In 2013, the Celtics were 40-41. Definitely not in a position to win a chip, but solid. But Danny Ainge, in his brilliant mind, said solid isn't good enough. They started a rebuild early and got tons of draft capital. This turned into Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and they traded the last pick for Kyrie Irving. Now, Kyrie didn't work out, but that's still 3 All-Stars for the price of 2 aging All-Stars. And as the great Steph Curry once said, probably, 3 is greater than 2. And the thing is, Danny Ainge was able to get the Jazz an even better return because Gobert and Mitchell weren't regressing. All I'm saying is Danny Ainge probably just worked his magic again. So yeah, next year the Jazz will be bad, and the next year they'll still probably suck, and then the year after that, but some year down the line, the Jazz will reap the rewards of this excellent offseason. So that is all for this video. In the video, I mentioned what can happen if a team is hesitant and how that may affect their star's legacy. I'll be making a vid next week or maybe the week after that, where I talk about what can happen to players when players are loyal. If it isn't out, subscribe so you can see it, and if it is, it's on your screen now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out.